Okay, so welcome everybody to the fourth lecture in the 2022 series of Where the Disciplines Meet online lecture series organized by Uniscape. The speakers will be introduced momentarily by Tessa Mattiani, and I just want to welcome everybody here and thank you for your participation, and also to remind you that these lectures are recorded. So while the live audience isn't necessarily huge in any particular case, we get a lot of views online as people go back and look over these talks. My job, I guess, is just to welcome you all to the series and to take this opportunity to remind you that the next lecture is going to be on the 14th of June, and that's the fifth lecture in the series, and then there's a summer recess. So we have a break for a couple of months, and we start up again on the 27th of September. So I'm very happy now to hand over to Tessa. I look forward to the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Conor. And also from my part, good afternoon and welcome to you to this fourth meeting of the Where Discipline Meet lectures. Today we have a quite interesting and crucial issue concerning the wind energies and the culture and landscape, with the aim, I suppose, to provide a sort of repertoire of the best practice guidelines for a well-integrated installation of these so complicated devices into a landscape. Today we will have a different format, not the consolidated combination between speaker and respondent, but I would say three voices presentation. So we have Pere, SALA, Daniela, COLAFRANCESCHI, and Fabio Manfredi. And all of our speakers have a specific expertise and knowledge on landscape-oriented issues in Mediterranean context. And Pere SALA will introduce the political context from the observatory point of view. Daniela COLAFRANCESCHI will frame this research project into the landscape and sustainability issues, whereas Fabio Manfredi will present the report itself. A little remark, you can find a very rich bibliography on this topic on the website of the event. And I'm going to introduce our three speakers. So Pere Sala Marti, who today is in Reims, in France. He has a degree in environmental science at the University of Barcelona. He is the director of the Landscape Observatory of Catalonia, and he also has been coordinator of the Landscape Observatory of Catalonia. He supervised also the landscape catalogs of Catalonia. His specific domain of research concern particularly integration of landscape issues into public policies, implementation of landscape policies in Europe, and also the link between landscape and development from national to local level. He works with the Council of Europe, with the Civilscape, and also with the Latino American Landscape Initiative. Is associate professor at the Department of Humanities of the University UPF in Barcelona, and also he also teach in many other masters, postgraduates, and courses. He wrote a lot of publication on issues oriented at landscape and sustainability, and it's important to announce that from 2003 to 2005, he was specialist at the Ministry of the Environment and Housing of the Government of Catalonia. We could add that he provided an important support to Uniscape work on Landscape Observatory during the two last conference, 2021 and 2020 and 2021 held in Florence. He participated, bringing his important experience on a landscape observatory. And then Daniela COLAFRANCESCHI, who today is in Barcelona, She is PhD in architectural design, and she's currently full professor in landscape architecture in the Faculty of Architecture of the Mediterranea University of Reggio, Calabria. And she has been head of the international relation for the faculty, and also director of the international Erasmus program, Changing Landscape, Mediterranean Sensitive Areas Design. She's currently member of the executive board of Uniscape, and also in 2022, she has been appointed president of the Italian Academic Society of Landscape Architecture. She has taught in many university at sub UPF and UAB in Barcelona, in Vienna, in Rabat, in Leuven. So she has a very international profile, but she is also, it is important to be announced, she is also a garden designer and a landscape architect. She has designed many gardens in, for example, so Chaumont-sur-Loire, Canet-de-Mar, and Girona. And an ephemeral work, Giardino del Vento, received the first prize at the Greenland Landscape Festival in Rome. Last but not least, she has been director of the landscape book series by Gustavo Gili, which has very important series of book for the landscape issues. And she received in that role a special mention. And then Fabio Manfredi, who is in Genoa, is a PhD in landscape architecture and now researcher at the DAD department of the University of Genoa. He has been adjunct professor at the University of Naples, Federico II, Roma III, and he has been visiting professor at the Lisboa University, University of Thessaly, Leuven in Belgium, Delft, and so on. He was also postdoctoral researcher at the Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands, and he published many contributions, articles, and monographs. One is particularly important to be mentioned, which is Linee nel Paesaggio, and also Nature of the Wind, the Culture of the Landscape Tour, an energy sustainability project in Catalonia. And I think we can stop here. And as our panel is very rich, and I think it's important to give the floor to our speakers. So thank you very much for your participation and for your presence. We are very, very glad to have you here today.
Thank you, Tessa. You hear me? Yes. I think there are a couple of people waiting to enter into the Zoom. It's okay? Yes. Tessa, you hear me? Yes.
Okay, yes, I can hear you perfectly.
Okay. I was saying thanks to Tessa for the presentation. Thanks to Uniscape for hosting us, and thanks and welcome to those who are connected today. We are very happy with this lecture because we believe that it's actually pertinent to the topic that Uniscape initiative has proposed, landscape and sustainability. And we will present the research as if we were telling a story. We have divided it into 4 parts, actually. The first outlines the institutional context of this work and therefore the significance and weight of the realization of guidelines for the Catalan reality. The second part places this experience within a cultural context that concerns the landscape and wind power in relation to the objective of the research. The third presents the document that we have drawn up and published as a result of this work and the methodology we have chosen for the guideline. And the fourth are some conclusions that me and Pere will add at the end. But before giving the floor to Pere, I would just like to add that our interdisciplinary research group, as you have seen in the video, consisted of the three of us, and also by Jordi Grau, environmental scientist, and Sergi Saladier, geographer. The great merit of the Landscape Observatory, which was commissioned by the government, was also that of identifying a group of people from different disciplines, but with totally complementary skills to carry out this work. And I think this is important to sublines, sorry. Pere, if you want to begin.
Thank you very much, Daniela. First of all, I would like to extend my thanks to Uniscape. It is a great pleasure to be in this event and to share this presentation with Daniela COLAFRANCESCHI and Fabio MANFREDI, and also to meet with good friends. Since the end of the 20th century until the first decade of the year 2000, the ongoing energy transition process in Catalonia was shaping new and unprecedented energy landscapes. It was a moment that the use of renewable energy sources, particularly wind power, was strongly promoted by Europe. But what is less clear is how they had to be best integrated in the territory, considering criteria other than those linked only to the most efficient wind collection. Indeed, renewable energies were producing a sudden and a strong transformation of the landscape due to their positioning in areas with visual exposure and with symbolic significance. In other words, beyond the inevitable visual effects, these infrastructures also have an impact on the landscape character, which has to do with identity, with cultural and even affective dimensions. In this context, the development of wind energy was, and it is still, experiencing a sort of paradox between the acceptance of these effects on a global scale and the rejections on many occasions of its impact on the local landscape. And the controversy existed for different reasons. First one, the scope, the intensity, and the concentration of in specific places. By the first half of 2013, there were 43 wind farms and 812 wind turbines spread over 43 municipalities. And in Catalonia, there are 947 municipalities, so only in 43 of 940. And 11 regions, and we have 42 regions, so 11 regions from 42 regions. So this means that they were highly concentrated territorially and particularly in the south of Catalonia. There was also a lack of information in the territory about the new projects, lack of participation from local authorities and property owners, lack of consensual planning, and little respect, again, little respect for the character of the landscapes. So at that moment, sectorial, spatial, and urban planning were promoting very general recommendations for projects in order to have a clear and legible image. Apart from avoiding protected areas, which is something common and necessary, these general criteria were a compact arrangement of wind turbines that reduces the area as much as possible. So first, compact arrangement. Two, the distribution of turbines around according a regular rhythm and harmony with the prevailing characteristics of the landscape, so according to topography, parcelling, infrastructures, etc. To avoid turbines in areas of scenic interest of symbolic values, or placing them as far as possible from inhabited centers. These were the criteria at that moment. However, these recommendations were too general to manage projects that were already underway and planned. Another aspect that as Landscape Observatory, we verified after analyzing some European experiences is that integration of wind projects in the landscape is a key element for social acceptance of these projects. So the more integrated in the landscape, the more accepted they are. So to provide more suitable operational tools, in 2013, the Directorate General for Environment Policies of the Catalan government commissioned the Landscape Observatory to draw up a propositional study to establish sensitive criteria for planning and for the installation of the new wind turbines. The government requested a report addressed to technicians, to professionals, to promoters, communities, and local institutions that would identify the best settings and the best conditions for the implementation of new wind turbines, where the quality of the landscape was the priority target, considering the values identified in the landscape catalogs that we were elaborating in the observatory. This priority, the landscape quality, is key to fulfill the objective of the European Landscape Convention and of the landscape law approved in 2005. So the report was finally titled Wind Energy and Landscape, Guidelines for a Suitable Installation in Catalonia. And the work team was, as Daniela COLAFRANCESCHI said before, composed by an international and interdisciplinary group formed by two landscape architects, Daniela and Fabio, one geographer, Sergi Saladier, and two environmental scientists, Jordi Grau and Pere. At that moment, the director of the Landscape Observatory was Joan Noguer, geographer too. The philosophy of the Landscape Observatory is always working in interdisciplinary groups, as we did with the elaboration of the landscape catalogs and other exercises and other projects. So our approach from the beginning, which Daniela COLAFRANCESCHI and Fabio Manfredi will explain now, was not to do a mere exercise in integrating these infrastructures in the landscape, but wind turbines implementation should be seen as a strategy to add value to the territory, and approach new values and new meanings linked to contemporaneity. So this approach had to be based on decentralization and energy redistribution, on the knowledge and awareness of the population of the territory, and on an improved involvement of local communities in terms of co-participation in both definition of the location of wind projects and in sharing of the consequent benefits. The study we are presenting is focused on Catalonia, but its philosophy and methodology can be extended to other places. And for this reason, we thought that the document would be of interest of this forum. Daniela and Fabio will explain them below.
Yes. Thanks, Pere. And thanks to explain this and make this introduction. I have just say that in the anachronistic impossibility of referring to totalizing theories or empirical research that could codify univocal methods of intervention on the landscape, our research, Wind Energy and Landscape, Guidelines for a Suitable Installation, involved a research into the methodology for installing wind farms and presents a critical reflections, some proposals, indication on the possible spatial, ethical and aesthetic effects of energy transition, beginning from landscape design, from the point of view of the landscape. This study, of course, make use of a background of documents studied, addresses, experiences on the best practice and policies implemented to date in Europe as a cultural context of reference. Actually, the main focus is an advancement of thought on design tools through new guidelines that espouse the dictates of the European Landscape Convention, the ELSI, and more recent, the ambitious goals set by the United Nations with the 2030 agenda, and experiment with suitable solution for a wind landscape as an identity product of the territories to which they are directed. Landscape and energy represent an inseparable and innovative binomial because of the impact that the transition implies and upon which we measure the quality of our habitat. So the challenge lies in operating a conceptual reversal for us. So from the energy project directed to at a territory to a territory requesting energy landscape design. So landscape design interprets the convergence of territorial values with the innovation of an energy system, because it's not measured on a geographical scale, but draws from geography the sense of the overwriting of everyday places, giving them sense, orientation, meaning, and narrative. So this research moves between ecology, society, nature, and culture. And methodologically, it does so by reversing the approach. Rather than designing a project for the correct installation of wind power plants, the project for the wind landscape is understood as new contemporary nature. And as Pere SALA told, we perfectly know that the use of renewable energy sources is strongly promoted by Europe, but what is less clear-cut is how wind turbines might be best integrated into the territory, taking into account criteria other than those linked only to the most efficient wind collection, the most efficient performance qualities. In fact, a more articulated assessment of this issue is needed that does not give it to facile and hostile attitudes in the name of safeguarding our landscape heritage, which are generated precisely by the lack of alternative criteria. So if the wind turbines have an adequate dialogue with the landscape, the central question is not how high the price the landscape pays, but how much higher the price the landscape pays for the absence of a project. So working in the landscape with the logic of the landscape to promote energy strategies as new forms of nature is the contemporary challenge for more conscious and informed and therefore truly sustainable landscape design. By operating on material, perceptive, and intangible aspect of the interface between the installation of the wind system and the places it addresses, the logic, the structural aspect, and the very matrix of the energy configuration is found in the landscape. Thus, the spatial repercussion of the new energy supply can determine the added value in landscape quality to the point of being defined as actions and processes that reconnect human transformation to environmental system. But how can we bring the logic of the wind farm closer to that of landscape and identify a structure that is not only compatible, but that also combine both entities in the search for a condition of harmony and quality of habitat? How can we express the value of social perception and ecological awareness of a wind farm as a construction of a different and new identity of sustainable landscape that substantiates ecology and society, nature and culture? And above all, how can it be explained? In other words, how can we find the most suitable form of expression which make it easy to transmit and communicate within an instance of critical awareness and environmental sustainability? And these are more or less the questions that substantiate this research. And the position taken by the investigation is to conceptually overturn the assumption a research not directed towards the integration of renewable infrastructure into the landscape, but accepting the challenge of broader responses is a study based on the design of ecological and sustainable landscape as a new form of nature, based on the decentralization and energy redistribution, on the better involvement of local communities in terms of co-participation, and on information and awareness of the population, with the conviction that beyond the performance value of the infrastructure, a wind farm can respond to a project for new landscape precisely by emancipating the meeting point between environmental, technological, ecological, and social values to the point of constructing new identities. So this is more or less our position in terms of the research. So now, Fabio, we will present the document.
Okay, I share my desktop. You can see?
Perfect.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Of course, I also thank you for the invitation, but after creating suspense around this report, it's my turn to go into the matter. Wind energy and landscape guidelines for an appropriate setting in Catalonia, it's a dossier on which a really heterogeneous group has worked, as already said, Daniela and Pere. This group combine knowledge, skills, and view of the landscape, as already the view that we saw before show clearly. I think it was precisely the sharing of attitude and points of view that made it possible to experiment with a methodology, first of all. A research methodology on mapping the wind landscape, first of all, on the visual and cultural impact of the wind energy, and on the hypothesis of wind farms that are not simply compatible with the landscape. So we have worked on where and how turbine can be placed, and how and from where they are perceived. We worked on the relationship of scale, distribution, figure and background, of rhythm, repetition, about every implication of deep, emergency, dissonance, contamination, contrast, harmony, on everything related to the compositional models of wind project, on the layout that turbines can add value to the landscape and not take off. The report consists of two parts. A first section in which we have introduced the main challenges that today, in the middle of a real paradigm shift that Pere told before, involves the relationship between energy, renewable energy and landscape. So this first section is our state of the art. What happens in Catalonia, what happens in the rest of Europe. Then after this part, we make another part. There is a second part, which is a real design-oriented research. So in it, we have identified criteria for the installation of wind farms that take into account every characteristics, quality, and diversity value of the landscape, as well as the capacity of the territory of the landscape to host it, to host the wind turbines. We investigated the relationship between these kind of elements like turbines with the landscape, starting with three important preliminary considerations. First of all, we consider just a single wind turbine model. Even though the currently market offer a wide range of wind turbines type, we decided to use just one. First of all, because in order to provide a better graphic illustration of model, simulation, and setting, but also to make clear our criteria. The second preliminary consideration is about visibility levels. So we decide to watch the turbine levels from an intermediate distance, from the distance from which they appear like dominant elements in the landscape, like landmark, but not at the distance that they don't impede the overall perception of the landscape. So they don't cover everything. The last preliminary consideration is about viewpoint. So we chose to watch these wind turbines from common points of view. So the main points of visual perception of the landscape, like towns and villages, route, panoramic sites. So these are our milestone, no? About our research. These are our milestone. After this consideration, we start to make to find our criteria. We found we identified some general principle. Before of all, we have identified some general principle of perception of wind turbines, of course, like shape, color, scale, layout, rhythm. And for each of them, to make clear our consideration, our criteria, we used simulation, photographic simulation, together with graphic representation and illustrative pictograms. Each one is named and numbered by references code. Also, behind this one, the color of the pictogram indicates the degree of greater or lesser compatibility in the landscape, like in this case, full circle, more recommended, less circle, empty circle, less. Because in this case, we are talking about rhythm. No, it's better to have the same kind of turbines that different shape and dimension of wind turbines. So after this preliminary consideration, after this consideration about single turbines or some of turbines in a space, we have found specific criteria on the diversity of the landscape in Catalonia. So we have identified the most representative characteristic of the Catalan landscape, like relief shapes, agricultural and forest landscape, constructed landscape, landscape milestone, and also thinking about cumulative effect about wind turbines. So for each of them, we have defined different hypotheses of wind turbine setting. And of course, hypothesis 1, 2, and 3, and of course, also in this case, the color of the pictogram indicates the level of compatibility with the landscape. So full square in this case, more recommended, empty, less. At the end, the sum, we build a sum of criteria in this way. And the sum of this criteria led to an abacus, like you can see in the screen. This abacus of pictogram and references code, it was for us an easy to consult tool that express every possible relationship between turbines and landscape. And in the last part of the document, of the dossier, we have used these criteria and tested these criteria on different case studies. Scenarios, we call it scenarios, territories that are like landscape unit, no? Like river terrace, coastal mountains, agroforest plants, agricultural plants. So different kind of scenario that are typical in Catalonia. And for each scenario, we have identified the most compatible wind farm setting and using the criteria of the abacus, always according to the different degree and levels and in coherence with the value that we found in this kind of landscape. So each project hypothesis can be easily evaluated, like you can see, because you can see more references called empty or full, and you can see also in visually way which is the better solution for the landscape, and also why. So behind this one, behind this kind of scenario, which are representative of the diversity of Catalonia, we have tested our criteria also in another type of case study, small scale everyday scenarios, probably more interesting context to build a new energy landscape, new nature, like Daniela said before. So with the same practice used for the general scenario, we have hypothesized, verified, and communicated the possible transformation of uncertain territories, lacking in clarity, like a port, where it is difficult to identify coherence, legibility, or identity. So ultimately, at the least, in this report, we have identified compatible solution of wind setting in wind farm setting in the landscape, but at the same time, we have explored the unexpressed potentially of wind energy in the landscape. Also, their task in the configuration and redefinition of the landscape. For us, the implementation of wind energy has been a strategy, of course, to add value to the territory, new value, new meanings, linked to the contemporaneity, mediate continuity between nature and culture, ecology and society. So now, after this overview of the document, so fast, I leave further conclusion to Daniela and Pere about this one. Thank you.
If you please could put the other PowerPoint, please. Yeah, just to define with few words better our thinking. But I don't. Yes. I want just to add that the development of wind energy is considered in this sense and for this research to be an important strategy for adding value to the territory in adherence to complex processes of change. It's therefore a question of generating a dialogue between wind energy and landscape in which physical issues such as a scale, a number of elements, their distribution and the consequent infrastructures are brought into play, as well as perceptive ones, entrusted to symbolic values, identity, and belonging to places. The landscape is a cultural product as the result of human activity and the numerous manifestations of its existence. The landscape is a field of signification. It's a writing on the territory of a human condition. It's a cultural product because it's made up of places, of differences and heterogeneity of spaces, where other and new meanings overlap and transit, and it's a cultural product because and for how it's perceived. And the landscape is relationship between man and environment, and between nature, culture, society, and individuals. It's the relationship between distinct fields of thought and knowledge relating to space. It's a place of conflict and compromise, of dialogue and interpretation through distinct syntaxes. The landscape is therefore a system, in the sense of the sum of superimposition of numerous levels of information in relation to each other, in the sense of time, space, scale, and dimension. It's a system because it's a unit of multiple data and factors. And also, a project is a system of language that is positioned in a place with its stories, feelings, meanings, which are hybridized in it. Human activity introduced new and overlapping levels of information and transformation and autonomous and independent layers. Avant-garde technological installation, sustainable energy networks, alternative energy production platforms, plans for the exploitation of clean resources, etc. The complexity of the landscape becomes the narrative structure that makes explicit in successions the modification and values of our contemporaneity. The complexity of the landscape becomes the narrative structure that make explicit in succession the modification and values of the contemporaneity, yes. So a wind farm infrastructure, it's one overlapping level more that legitimize the new narrative structure as a new signification of landscape. The wind power infrastructure, it's one overlapping level more that legitimize the new narrative structure as a new signification of landscape. The wind power infrastructure is one more information layer which with the new landscape are equipped. So it's a new system. The sequence of turbine in their arrangement and type defines a wall that is unique and its implication of scales and dimension. The wind turbines, adapted and in tune with the morphology of the land, become a system unit because only as such does the installation have a meaning as well as a function. This implements the image and the future projection of sustainable landscapes. This generated a new relationship between the wind farm and the landscape, which brings into play both physical issues like scale, distribution, depth, perception, and conceptual issues like ideological and identity values in the dialogue and content it implies. Consequently, it broadens a cultural landscape because it adheres to an emerging contemporary current idea of landscape. Thus, wind power becomes a landscape element in itself. A wind park is therefore a cultural product because it's the expression of a complex, a contemporary condition of landscape, of its level of transmission and information of energetic perceptive, social, economic values, never static and progressively better in the ethical and aesthetic quality of its design. It's a landscape that legitimates its new status as an energy project, giving shape to ecology. In 2 words, nature of the wind and culture of the landscapes. I'm sorry because the word going up has to become a blue, but are black, but never mind. Okay. So I don't know if Pere, SALA want add just some conclusion.
Well, it's not conclusion, but after your presentation about the contents and the methodology, I just would say that with this study, we wanted to put on the table that the issue of landscape is not purely a personal appreciation, as it sometimes is argued, no? It is not like this. The values of the landscape are perfectly objectivable and go beyond the natural ones, go beyond the protected areas, biodiversity, etc. As a reflection of a social and a territorial identity, the landscape is impregnated with social, cultural, historical, spiritual, aesthetical values. And some of these values have an intangible character, but they are no less relevant for this. We studied that in defining the quality of the landscape, it is just as important to consider a protected area, an endemism, or an animal species in danger of extinction as the landscape imaginary experienced, felt, and lived by the local population. Next, and to finish, I will briefly explain the application of this document, the document that we have just presented to you. So once the document was finished in 2013, the government preferred not to make it public and to keep it as internal to use it as internal recommendations. 6 years after, in 2019, the government approved a decree on urgent measures for the climate emergency and the boosting of renewables. This decree simplified the authorization process for the new wind and photovoltaic installations and created the opportunity for dozens of wind parks and hundreds of these new turbines in a short time. Again, in specific areas, again, in those where the turbines are the more concentrated, and with a timid mechanism for participation of local agents and communities. In this year, in 2019, the document was public, and it served as a tool that provided criteria and recommendations to the promoters and helped the administration in the evaluation of the new projects, which was case by case. 2 years later, in 2021, so last year, a new government modified the decree with the aim of implementing a more participatory approach. So this new decree stopped with the previous projects from 2018 and has significantly reduced the number of new projects. In any case, even if the report was parked for a long time, for 6 years, with the last 2 decrees, regardless of their vocations, some of the approaches and criteria that Daniela and Fabio have explained are being considered and assumed as a way to improve the quality of the resulting landscape. Therefore, the document that we have just presented to you is not a compulsory document, but a tool for support, for consultation, and very important, and pedagogy for all the sectors. Thank you for your attention, and we are open to your questions about the methodology, the contents, etc. Thank you.
Thank you so much to the 3 of you for this very interesting, very stimulating, and very rich presentation. Actually, I would have 2 questions, but I would like to know before if any one of the participants has questions to propose. No, I can start, so. No, Sasha. First, Sasha Dobricic.
Well, I can wait after your question, no problem, no problem. Go on, I will, no? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation. I always believed that guidelines and handbooks are much more interesting and useful than laws or formalized requirements. And actually, in co-design process, they are really of great support. So first of all, yes, a guideline is really a nice tool to implement projects. Now, it's more a comment because I was thinking of first a situation in Slovenia. One of the first books that was related specifically to landscape was done by artists, Academy of Art of Slovenia, called Visual Ecology. And on the front page, there was the problem of wind farms. So we were here in late 80s, 1980s. So indeed, these wind farms are strongly challenging social acceptance because of landscape changes. And this is quite well documented. I mean, people desire usually improvements, but they hate changes. We always face this problem. I mean, people certainly may support low carbon solutions, but they contest usually specific implementations of these solutions, no? And that's why I appreciate your example, because it's a way how landscape thinking helps to implement these solutions step by step. Because I was trained as an architect, traditional architect, you know, a lot of concrete and so on, houses and etc. And we always face this problem when working with people, that people might be negative or positive before the construction, then usually they are negative during the works, and then at the end, when there is a result, they're again or positive or negative. So exactly here, the guidelines and successful narratives helps to overcome these very critical points. And I come now to to my question. So if there is a lot of research that also ongoing that is analyzing how wind farms are challenging the social acceptance, the community acceptance, is there enough research, and how it's linked to might be linked to your work, is how people adapt to changes. I mean, we always analyze what people don't like, but we miss many times that people do adapt to changes. They're creative beings. I mean, so I found your presentation also very interesting for this second part of research. But anyway, thank you.
Sasha, good afternoon, because it's many times that we don't see each other. I think that Pere can perfectly answer to the question, but I just want to add one thing that I think is fundamental, especially at the beginning of the process. These guidelines, for example, as you have seen or understood from the pictogram that we use, the scheme, the color, the symbols, are marking suggestions. So we put a solution, we put the good solution, that's so quite not so good solution, the best or not. So our different hypotheses make that the document is not something that is imposed, but is something to discuss. Just at the beginning, the formula make a consensus, because it's building, is trying to realize a dialogue with people. So I think that this is the first, also in the way in which draw everything, is like a way to make to build a dialogue with the people and with the villages and so on. And then probably Pere about the work with people, no, with the communities.
Well, I don't think I have a perfect answer to this question. Thank you for the question, Sasha. But we stated that it depends. People adapt to changes depending on the intensity of the new elements on the landscape, the intensity, the concentration, the scope, etc. So you can adapt it when there is a little change on the territory. So it's a change that is compatible with the values of the place, and that these values, these traces continue on the time. The problem is that from in a small period of time, you have a great change that change absolutely the character of the place, and then people, the opposition to these projects part is for this reason, and it's not a question of the adaptation. So while in 10 years they will be adapted. No, the first wind farms we have in the south of Catalonia, they were from the 90s, more or less. I explained before. And people are continuing being against this concentration. So it's a question of intensity, the speed, if it's fast or slow, this transformation, etc.
The noise.
Thank you. It's very much in line with what happens in Slovenia. People just don't adapt to this. Okay, thank you. You answered my question perfectly. Thank you.
We have another question by Graça. We can't hear you.
Let's put, okay.
Thank you. Yes.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for this this presentation. It was very inspiring because I'm part of a team involved of the Landscape Observatory in central Portugal. It's Charneca. It's an area with not very much populated and with a forest cover of cork oak. And what we decided just to begin thinking on this issue, because with these changes in the energy production, there was a coal center that in the region that closed, and now the market for renewable energy has risen. And so it was very important to listen and to know about the reports that I asked to have the access, because it's an area where the landscape is vulnerable. There are some intents of, but very much at the beginning and on a very case-to-case inquiries. So there's not a plan announced, there's just only contacts with landowners if they accept or do not accept. So the process is exactly in its beginnings. And we at our Landscape Observatory were concerned about what could we ask and add to the municipality and to the entities to have a more participatory knowledge about the process, and also some answers or some recommendations to present. So that's why this talk was so opportune for our group, and I intend to see in details the reports. And I met Pere some years ago in Barcelona, I remember. And maybe we're gonna ask also your advice if this project goes beyond, because it's very interesting, and we would like to give an answer for thinking on the landscape, and not only on the profit that maybe landowners will pursue with this project, and give and have a landscape context in this approach. So it was very useful, and maybe you have some recommendation to give us, so how to deal with institutions in just this beginning of this big project. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Grassa. I don't know who wants to reply, to comment, or to...
Maybe I can just come in there for a moment and join everybody else in thanking the speakers. This was a really excellent paper and a very important one. I mean, I've written down here, a new paradigm is born, only to learn that it's not born, it's already 7 years old. And we all know that 7-year-olds are at the point in their lives where they're losing their baby teeth and they're getting their adult teeth. And it seems to me from your final comments, Pere, that the government is finally waking up to the importance and significance of the guidelines you have promoted. I have a short question and an observation. The first, I'll ask the question, and I'm sure it's very simply answered. Is the report translated into any other languages? Because it should be. And I think that we should put our shoulder behind any efforts that you might already have in place to have this document translated and circulated right across Europe, because it's really important. It's really important. And also, I know that we're recording this talk, but you three should be on tour to various government departments Colm, who is down there from me on the screen I'm looking at, is nodding his head because we have minister who might be receptive to this in Ireland. And I think the first thing I'm going to do tomorrow is make contact and tell him to have a look at this recording as soon as he can, but also to invite you over, and also to suggest to him that this should at the very least be translated into English, but I think into other languages as well, because I think it's that important. So thank you very much for that.
Wow, what an honor to receive this word, Connor. No, it's true. I would like, of course, to come if I am invited, and I would like to explain it better in terms of the way with which we have built the document, because today we were only this short time, so is limited. But I have to say that if we can imagine to publish it and translate it, I will add one chapter more, just to putting it at the day, because as you can see in the video at the beginning, look at my eyes, long time passing since this document. So actually the word, the concept are going ahead. And for example, there is a very interesting argument that is the day after, when a wind park become obsolete, for example, and what happened when you have to take away the turbine and you have many roads, you have many cabins, you have a lot of infrastructure that you have to reuse, recycle, and so on. For example, I would like to add a chapter if could possible. And then it's true, it's a very important document. I think that in terms of experimentation is important, not because it's in relation with the Catalan reality only, but because it's a methodology. Mm-hmm. So it's not for a political solution of the problem. That is not a solution, but just because it's a kind of experimentation made with this point of view, reversing the point of view.
The other thing just as well is I think that it really proves the value of landscape observatories. You know, it's the perfect platform to sponsor this type of research, but also, as emerged as you talked, to be the place for the discussion to happen. And I think that that's another lesson I think that we should all learn as well. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Connor, for your words. There are different summaries, document of synthesis of this document. I put it on the chat, the Italian and the English version. We also have in Spanish and French, etc. Well, it's a short document, it's a synthesis, but the main ideas are there. The philosophy, you know, the deep discourse, no, is there, and but not all the document. Yeah, it's in Catalan for the government. And I agree absolutely with you when you say that landscape observatories and institutions like this, similar, are very valuable in the sense that they are more flexible because they are not administration, they are not civil society, they are not universities, they are in the middle of all of them. So it is more flexible, and you can be an actor to speak, to dialogue, and to change with everybody. No? And this is, for landscape, this is very important in our experience.
So if I may, I have just a remark and two questions. I have appreciated your research very much, because I think it has a groundbreaking attitude in the way in which you face this challenge, and you consider all the different dimensions of landscape-oriented issues and all the roles and all the disciplines. So thank you very much for this, and many compliments for your excellent work. My two questions are, the first, both Pere and Daniela said that these guidelines could be adapted to another situation, another country, and what are the potential application, and what are, in your opinion, the differences to be considered in the changing the site for this research. And the second is the role of the graphic first representation, then interpretation and communication, because you use the many graphical tools, so the abacus, the bird view, so many graphic ways in interpreting the landscape. So I would like to have some details for that. Thank you.
Tessa, thank you. In relation to the replication of the document to other parts of Europe, as Fabio showed in his presentation, the examples are from Catalonia, and are based. All these examples are based on the character of these places, no? And so it's not the same, the landscape in Catalonia or in Ireland or in France or in Italy, etc. So I think what is replicated is the methodology, but not the final result.
Thank you.
And the pictogram that was actually was a pleasure to do, actually, I think are exactly the way to communicate better, more than a picture or idealization of the graphic. A situation is more communicative, it's another way to have a dialogue, more friendly, more with much effect. And in this sense, I have to say, and I have to thank Pere, because we made very proofs, no, right, Pere, before decided which kind of draw and in which sense, from where, and entering how much into the image of the landscape. And on the other hand, all the landscape the picture of the landscape that we took was photomontated, was changed, because we didn't want to make immediately recognize the places from the people so is more or less our landscape from Catalonia, but a lot of layer that modificate the landscape, making a landscape that actually does not exist, but is an example. So I think that the way to apply this system to another landscape, for example, in Italy, is this, make another very important archive and situation of unit of landscape, applying then this methodology that, as I told before, is the suggestion of 2 or 3 solutions. It depends. It's not you have to say that change a little bit the philosophy, no?
Thank you, Daniela. Connor wrote
the drawing under. Yes, I draw a lot for this document, actually.
The point I'm trying to make, I guess, is in a non-political way, your drawings are disarming. They're friendly. They demonstrate real commitment. Anyone can drive up to a viewpoint and take a photograph and drive away to the office and say, well, this is the photograph. But the drawings, they imply time and thought and care. And in that sense, I think they, as I said here, although I should have put an or at the end of your credentials, they underwrite your credentials as authentic voices, I guess. In the process, I think drawings are quite disarming in that regard. And they're very nice drawings, by the way. I like them a lot.
Yes. And they remind me to Jacques Simon way of looking at the landscape.
Exactly. Yeah. Then there is a picture that we have not here, in which there is a gift that at the end I made to the observatory, and I collect a lot of chocolates, bonbon with this pictogram that they became the gift. No, do you remember? Pere was very funny. Yeah, because I think it's a way to communicate that is friendly, exactly as Connor said.
They are not in the observatory because it was chocolate. They are eaten already.
I particularly like the way that you turn the conversation completely around. It's through 180 degrees. So instead of going from the position that a turbine is a necessary evil and an imposition on the landscape, to looking at it almost from the point of view of public art, and that a community might eventually get to the point of pride in living in a landscape that has stepped up to the plate of renewable energy. Color is an interesting thing. I mean, I was thinking as I was looking at some of your photographs, I'm not an engineer, so I don't know what the static electricity is like, but why do they have to have big, cylindrical poles? Why can't they have plants growing up them, climbers and ivies and maybe even vine or grapes? Is that an issue? Would that change the aesthetic of them in a way that might make it even less injurious from a visual point of view? I don't know. I think we'll eventually look back at this at some point. Some generation is going to look back at pictures of these and say, is that the best you could do from an aesthetic point of view?
Yeah.
So, Connor, call Mary, another question.
Well, an appreciative comment to add to Connor's appreciation of this study and how important it is. Taking a slightly different angle, I really appreciated the way you described this as an open framework for having a dialogue with a community. And I think that this is incredibly important. How do we construct tools that help people to make decisions that they're satisfied with, that also can plug into statutory systems and development control and the big plans of municipal government to change the world or what have you. And I think to celebrate and develop that idea that the tools, maybe it's information. What I see is, again, the abacus, the array of drawings, the set of different ways that you can think about something being very important and empowering. And that in its own right is a contribution to democracy, as well as good design and landscape change management. So Maybe that's a thread that becomes even more important in future work, that you bring to the fore and say, this is a very important principle. It's certainly something that has happened with the work of the Heritage Council here in Ireland in different arenas over the last 10 years, perhaps a little under the guidance and enthusiasm of Conor when he was with us. So I'd just like to thank you for that particular aspect of this guidance, and to echo Sasha's comment about handbooks and guidance being so much more important than the legislation.
That's true. Thank you. Thank you.
In the chat, there is also a comment from Catherine Santa about a group called Paysage Après Pétrole, and they use friendly drawings. So
we will see it.
Yes, I know a Paysage Après Pétrole, and they use this block diagram. They are these traditional drawings in France, and it's very useful to understand a place. This drawing, yeah, it's true.
Oh, but sometimes I wonder if it's not too nice. We are as if we were thinking that the landscape and life will be so nice once we will use only wind. And I'm a little bit bothered sometimes by this feeling of some utopian vision of renewable future. But that's my own. And maybe it's not a problem. It's good to have a vision, and it's good to work on the vision and to bring forth the possibilities of the vision. But one shouldn't forget that what we will be facing will not be the ideal world. And so we need to be able to look at the non-ideal parts of the world as well. So if such work can help do that, that's great. If they make us kind of be blind to the actual nastiness of things, then maybe it's not so good. So it has to be used as a way to open into other directions than just this ideal vision we might have of a good landscape and a good world in general.
thank you, Cato, a very wise comment.
So I come back to my comment at the last of the online lectures that this is an emergency. We're in an emergency now.
Yes.
And so the vision of a good planet is one that is not overheating, and that we aren't suffering the rate of biodiversity loss that we're suffering as well. And so there are some kind of essential realities as well. I mean, I think I'm in absolute agreement with you, Catherine, there, you know, that there's no point in over sugarcoating this, but by the same token, I think so dialogue will reveal complex kind of reactions to these things, but quite often dialogue is also a way of reassuring people that at least their voice is heard, and they make an active contribution to these dialogues, you know, however difficult they might be.
So in that sense, maybe even what you were saying, that guidelines are better than regulations and laws, maybe it's not this. They complement each other, because guidelines are something that take time, more time than suddenly laws, but maybe some laws are made because of the guidelines that are around. And they work at a different time frame, and because it's now urgent to act, I think all the time frames need to be brought in. So this is one tool among many others that we have to activate, and not just we landscape architects, but in general we human beings or societies. And the more we have, of course, the better, and the more they can talk to the more people, and in that sense, this type of drawings, for instance, are important because they make things acceptable, visible, thinkable. To make them thinkable, that's a very important part of the message.
Sorry, Catherine, just one comment on guidelines. I stressed the importance of guidelines because of experience that we had in seismic domain. I mean, guidelines were so much successful in implementing right solutions adapted to typical local situation than restrictive or formalized requirements, because guidelines demand that you understand them fully. So guidelines are not so straight, they are very open. You have to interpret them. And it was incredible how in seismic vulnerability of buildings, guidelines did, especially in Italy, I mean, probably Tessa and other Italian colleagues know the shift that was made, positive shift through guidelines instead of just have strict requirements.
Oh, I'm sure that they're absolutely essential as well, but they might work at a different time scale. And all the time scales need to be brought into the process now because it's urgent. And probably because we're late anyway. So, but no, I think it's very important, this type of work indeed.
I think this issue is very crucial, so maybe we can continue this discussion also within another frame, and I would leave also the floor to Connor to wrap it up.
Okay, thank you very much. Our first thanks go to the three speakers for an absolutely excellent paper. You could tell from the comments and the observations and the questions afterwards that it really hit home, and that the importance of the paper, the importance of the approach, and the importance of spreading this approach out to other places, notwithstanding what you were saying, Pere, that there are different landscapes or different characters and different topographies and different vegetation covers and all of that, but this is a methodology, and that's the important thing about it. That's what makes it translatable. So I want to thank you for an excellent paper. We're very proud to have hosted it, and to thank those who have joined in, who have listened. They also serve who only stand and wait, and to thank those who've participated in what was a very interesting and open discussion at the end. And just to remind everybody, and we'll send you around a reminder of this in due course, that the next where the disciplines meet installation is going to be on the 14th of June, not too far away from the longest day of the year, so we'll all be in brightness at that stage. So I wish you all a lovely evening, and thanks again to our speakers, and thank you, Tessa, and to Tommaso for organizing things behind the scenes.